Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Asher Marketing Podcast. I'm Anthony Giuliano, and my guest this week is Jim Marbach. Jim, how you doing?
Pretty good.
Well,
good to be here.
Thanks for doing this. I have the distinction and the privilege of having known your wife for quite some time, and I'm going to go on the record as saying that I asked her to be on this podcast because she is the next generation owner and the marketer at Three Rivers Running Company. I asked her to be on this podcast, and she said no. Can you believe it?
I can confirm.
So you have to represent.
It is tough to believe. She is definitely the talker of the
Well,
two of us.
we'll see if we can change that. And the two of you have a young daughter who, just as you mentioned, is turned 19 months old?
Yep. Just about tomorrow, she will turn 19 months.
All right. So what I have experience with having a child, but he's 22, so I forget what that period is like. What's the 19-month-old getting into?
Everything. Absolutely everything. No, it's a very fun period right now. But anything and everything that's waist height and below, she can access.
All right.
And she will scatter across the house, and I have to save her life about 5 times a day. So that's kind of the zone that we're in right now.
So you and Lynn both have pretty demanding jobs. How do you make it work with a young kid?
Yeah. So combination of, in terms of childcare, combination of babysitter, and my mother-in-law has been gracious enough to watch Rhea a few times a week, and then Fridays she gets to hang out at home with me.
Nice. Well, we won't disparage Lynn too much, or your mother-in-law may stop watching the baby, so we'll get away from that. But we want to talk first, Jim, about your career path, and I know you worked for a different organization in the past, but I want to hear about what you were thinking about when you were a kid, when you first started thinking about where you wanted to be career-wise, and whether that path continued or whether you took a detour, and if so, why? So where were you in terms of careers? What was that like for you when you first started thinking about it?
So, growing up, I probably didn't give nearly as much thought to my career as I should have.
Yeah.
But, one thing that always stuck with me is I really like to create things. So, when I was a little kid, I liked to create little mini movies or videos using my parents' camcorder, and I would, no editing software or anything like that, just doing, straight up shooting shot, pause.
Yeah.
And then when I went into high school, I had the opportunity to take vocational class, junior and senior year. And Belmont High School actually had a radio TV production class.
Okay. Yeah.
So it just sounded like fun.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
Not a whole lot of intent behind it.
Yeah.
But my junior year, I took that class with a teacher named Tom Rentschler. I really liked it. Got kind of a well-rounded experience of broadcast. They did, I think it was a weekly show.
Okay.
And, we got these assignments that would just be like, create a documentary, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Really simple, but,
Sure.
Just getting my feet wet in shooting, editing, all that kind of stuff. And then I liked it so much that I actually took it a second year, my senior year. So then, when it comes time to graduate and go off to college, I was kind of looking at some different schools, and Ball State and Huntington, they both had digital media arts programs, I think is what they called them at the time.
Sure.
And I had a couple friends going to Huntington. Huntington offered me a little more financial aid, and so I was like, "Hey, let's go to Huntington."
Yeah. Well, and I'm biased because they're an Asher client, but they have a great program in that area. So I would imagine it wasn't all that long ago, but the equipment was very different than what you're working on today.
Yeah.
So was that an interest in the journalism side initially? I know you said it really wasn't a well-rounded, or you didn't have a specific idea, but were you leaning towards journalism?
Not really.
Yeah.
I was more interested in film.
Okay.
Like straight up film.
Okay.
I didn't have a ton of direction.
Yeah.
I didn't have a goal.
Yeah.
I would say. But I think as I got into the program, I started to find my interest. I really liked some of the documentary work I was doing.
Yeah.
I really had a knack for cinematography, and I sort of gravitated towards that. So it's one of those things. It's just I kind of had to do it trial and error style to figure out exactly what I wanted.
Yeah. So you go from Huntington. Do you go right into the job with DeBrand?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you get there? How do you get from Huntington to working for a well-known Fort Wayne company?
Yeah. So one of my good friends, Josh Wickersham, former guest of the pod.
That's correct. Yes.
He actually he got a position. He graduated, got a position at DeBrand the year before I did. So that was my connection to DeBrand. So the year I graduated, I started working there pretty much just a few months after the summer ended.
Sure. So how long are you at DeBrand, and how do you find your way to the next job?
Yeah, so I was at DeBrand for 4 years, and kind of doing a hybrid model job where half the time I was in the office working. I was doing video, photo, social media, just kind of jack of all trades. I got to go to trade shows, which was a really cool experience. Yeah. And then the other half of the time I was in the retail store. And so I got some experience with management there, which was also something that's been beneficial since.
Yeah, for sure.
And then my manager at DeBrand, she actually left to get a job at her hometown in Syracuse at Polywood.
Okay.
And so that was my connection to Polywood. She made the move to Polywood, and then probably about a year later started hitting me up and just kind of seeing what I was thinking in terms of like my career path, and that kind of got the ball rolling on that move.
And was it a video position initially?
It was.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So and it was all new.
Yeah.
So Polywood, they've been around for a while, founded in 1990, but up to that point, they were doing primarily, selling to the brick and mortar stores and national accounts. There was no e-commerce website, and not really much of a brand to speak of.
Sure.
Aside from just, hey, these are the selling points of the furniture itself, and then dealers and national accounts, you figure out how to market it.
Yeah. Well, and Polywood is one of those companies, really impressive company, and it kind of snuck up on me. I mean, I've lived in this area for 20 years, and I heard the name, and I knew people who had Polywood furniture, but I had no idea it was headquartered in Syracuse, and B, I didn't know how much national reach it had. As a matter of fact, in prepping for this conversation, which, listeners, was supposed to happen weeks ago, but Jim and I got our lines crossed, and I made him make an unnecessary trip to Asher, so thanks for coming back. But in prepping for that, I was listening to some podcasts, and I was like, wow, this is a really big brand. Is that the result of changes that have been made more recently, or has that always been the case, and it just kind of eluded me?
Yeah, so I think it was in 2018 when we launched, 2017, 2018 is when we launched the retail site. And so since then, we've really been pushing to build the brand. We have the benefit of being the originators of, the poly lumber furniture in the industry. And it's kind of like the Kleenex thing where people just associate Polywood with, any poly lumber. Yeah. So, there's pros and cons to that. But in terms of like, reach, in terms of like SEO and those types of things, like we had that element locked down pretty well before the brand was ever even really launched from an e-commerce standpoint. All
right. So it's always been a successful company, but accelerated its growth in the past few years. So to take a step backwards for the few people who may not be familiar with the name of the company, tell us how you describe Polywood when someone asks you, where do you work?
Yeah. So in terms of what we do, Polywood manufactures outdoor furniture out of recycled plastics, specifically number 2 plastics. So your milk jugs, detergent containers, anything that's got the number 2 stamped on the bottom. That's the type of plastics that we use, and we manufacture everything from your Adirondack chairs that you see out on piers and on people's back porches and things like that, to rocking chairs. We do deep seating, and we're ever expanding into different types of furniture.
Sure. So how big is the team you're part of, and talk about your role within that team?
Sure. We have an internal creative team, and I want to say we have 9 members now.
Yeah.
Don't hold me to that.
All right.
But it's right around there. So I'm sorry, what was the rest of the question?
And what's your role on the team?
Yeah.
So it sounds like, from what I understand, you're focused on the video side.
Correct.
And how many other folks are doing just that, or do you wear multiple hats? How does all that work?
Yeah, so the creative team is broken into, we have an imagery team, we have design, and then there's video. So imagery, they're doing the still photography. We do in-house rendering.
Yeah.
Of studio images and things like that. And then we have our design team. They're doing all the design works for emails, ads, all that kind of thing. And then the video team. And so on the video team, there are 3 of us now.
Okay.
For a long time, it was just me.
Yeah.
But within the past year and a half or so, we've added 2 new team members. We're creating all kinds of different video assets, anything from ads that you'd see on social media to how-to videos, as well as that for the Pollywood brand specifically. But then we're also creating assets for the national accounts that we work with. A lot of them, they have some. Anytime you can get them video content, they absolutely want it. So they're kind of lining up for that kind of thing that'll help build out the products that they have on their website.
Yeah. So how seasonal is the production work? In talking with our mutual friend Josh, we were talking about the hard task he has of having to be out on boats in the summer, and a job that most people would love. But is there any seasonality to your work, or is it kind of equally spread out throughout the year?
Yeah. So for the creative team, it's pretty spread out throughout the year.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot of work in advance. We're trying to work, 3 months in advance or so, depending on, what we're working on. But, we're trying to get things done in advance. In terms of the actual physical production of the furniture, we're talking springtime springtime through early summer is really their busy season, and then it tapers off through the fall, and then I guess you would say winter is like down season, but there's really no down season anymore. With a lot of the pushes that we're doing.
Sure. So in terms of the challenges, one of the things that has been a change in my career is that, and I'm old. Let me just disclaim that. So pre broadband internet, video was a rarity. You shot it, maybe for a client once or twice a year max. It was big production, and it was infrequent, and it was somewhat expensive. And fast forward to 2022, when video is now frequent and varying degrees of cost depending on the application. How do you keep that beast fed, and what are some of the challenges you face in doing that?
Yeah. As you've stated, it's definitely a lot cheaper than it used to be. A lot of what we do takes a lot of time, for sure, and there's definitely high demand. So definitely prioritizing and knowing when to say no is really important. So I guess getting data-driven information on what we're producing is really, really important. And that's something that our team as a whole has really been pushing for, because if there's no data or strategy given, then there can just be requests.
Yeah. Everything's a
it can
priority.
Get wild.
Yeah. So you're looking at social media analytics, Google Analytics to determine what are people responding to, and then
and then in the case of national accounts or whatever, it could be volume of a specific product, and if there's enough volume, maybe we'll make video assets. There's a lot of discussion goes into determining what gets made.
Well, and I would imagine that when COVID hit, all the logic went out the window, because I would imagine huge demand and then challenges with supply chain, and you just have to do the best to keep up that you can.
Yeah. So we were actually really fortunate that Polywood is pretty vertically integrated. So we're not really reliant on, importing things for in terms of like materials and things like that. We make our own lumber. The plastic that we're sourcing is semi-local, from Indiana and the surrounding states. Yeah. And so we're able to keep chugging along.
Well, that's great. That's a huge advantage, especially now.
Yeah. When some of our competitors, they just weren't, because they were outsourcing that stuff from other places.
Wow. Yeah.
So, there was no slowing down during the pandemic. And in terms of like what our team was doing, we just kind of did what we could. We do a decent amount of traveling to do photo shoots and video shoots. So we're kind of limited during that time. We've been making up some ground recently. Yeah.
So what are some of the things, and obviously only share what you're comfortable sharing, but some of the things you're working on now? Are you working on holiday stuff that'll appear around the end of the year? Or are you further out than that? And what are some of the big projects that are on your plate right now?
Yeah. So one really cool thing that I've gotten to work on this year is the video assets that are related to our new designer series. So in the past, or our general Polywood brand, it's people would refer to it as like cottage furniture, kind of really classic designs and things like that, and some stuff that gets into the more modern aesthetic. But we've launched we're calling it the Polywood Designer Series, and it's more high design stuff.
Okay.
A lot more modern, and there's just a lot more design work that goes into it. There's a lot more like handcrafted elements to it, and so we've partnered with design ambassadors for the new lines that we're putting out, and so we're doing an initial launch with 3 different collections, and so we partnered with a different ambassador for each collection. Yeah, and so we're doing a video and video assets related to all those launches. So that's been a really cool project that I've been working on recently. Have 2 of those down and 1 more to go. Okay. And that's definitely something where production values kind of at a premium.
Oh, for sure.
For those projects, we really want the assets that we're putting out to match the quality of the product and that kind of high design feel. Yeah,
for sure. Well, one of the podcasts I listened to was actually, I think it was a trade show in Vegas, and it was all about interior design and Polywood's role in that, which I didn't anticipate. Maybe I should have, but it was kind of interesting to hear, because they were talking about some, I was conditioned to, okay, Polywood is the traditional Adirondack chair, but they were talking about some different facets that I wasn't yet aware of. So it's all starting to line up now for me. So
and that's a big part of it is taking something that looks like it would be designed for interior use and bringing that outside and helping people make their exterior living areas kind of an extension of their interiors. That's kind of a big mantra for us in general. Something that we're striving to do as a brand. But specifically with the designer series and some of those design elements, you're seeing a lot more of that.
Yeah. So in terms of how much you can predict, what's going to happen a few months down the line, there's so many variables that go into video. Sometimes the weather's got to be right. There's, talent considerations. Mm-hmm. There's, the attention spans of the audience. How are you addressing some of those concerns? Is there anything that you've found is helpful, or anything that you're doing to kind of manage those challenges and make it more likely that at the end of the day you're going to turn out something that is going to work 3 months down the line with all those variables? Yeah,
that's a good question. In general, when we're setting out to produce something, we definitely want to make sure it's evergreen. Mm-hmm. Usually, if we're putting a bunch of time and resources into a specific video asset, we usually try to make sure it's multi-use.
Yep.
So if we're going on a photo shoot, we want to make sure we're getting photography out of it, we're getting video out of it, we're getting product shots out of it, mm-hmm. and also getting really good, high quality footage with people enjoying the furniture.
Okay.
So that's kind of our general format.
Yeah.
And that's something we try to abide by. Anytime we're dedicating resources to content generation, we want to make sure we're getting all those elements, and then plus, social, blog. We're kind of tying everything together, and that kind of makes for a nice cohesive, all around brand content push.
Yeah.
Because just everything works together.
So a related question, and if this question makes it sound like I know what I'm talking about when it comes to video, I absolutely don't. So it may be a bad question, but with social media being where it is today, are you having to account for this may be vertical, this may be horizontal, and when the product is kind of the hero, what challenges does that bring in that you're dealing with from sort of a direction standpoint?
Yeah. So, being more like of a cinematographer mind, I obviously am drawn towards your standard horizontal vertical video. Vertical video sometimes makes me cringe a little bit, but it's definitely something that we need to plan for.
Sure.
It's anytime we're shooting now, we want to make sure we're getting, wide variations of the standard shots that we're shooting, stuff that we can crop for social.
Yeah.
That's always something that we're considering.
Yeah. So yet another variable you have to deal with.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So let's pivot to some of the more quick hit questions I wanted to ask you. And the first one has to do with careers. You've done a couple different things. You've worked as a team of one, and now you're managing people. What have you learned in all that you think is advice worth passing on in terms of how you build a successful career, a fulfilling career?
Yeah, that's a good question. One thing that I've found challenging moving from, kind of one-man band to a larger team is just kind of letting go of the control a little bit. I think setting a standard and kind of enforcing that standard is really important. And I think that's how you get, high quality product every time you do it, even if you're not hands-on in every aspect of it. So I think that's something that, I've recently had to become better at.
Well, I think it's making the imperatives unmistakable, but everything else kind of letting some stuff go, because if you try to communicate that everything is an imperative, that's micromanagement. It doesn't work. But if you can say, hey, here are the 3 to 5 things that we got to deliver every single time, how you get there is up to you. I think that tends to go a little bit better.
Yeah.
So the second quick hit question has to do with, and I'm going to give you an option here of either talking about something related to Hollywood or something related to the world of video. But what's a myth or misconception that you want to clear up, or something maybe that's underappreciated that you want to amplify, something that most people may not know as well as they should, or they may know something that isn't all that true?
Huh.
And we can come back to that one if you want.
Might stump me with that one. I think the biggest thing that's misunderstood probably is just the amount of time and resources that go into this type of content creation. Even even the stuff you're seeing nowadays on like YouTube content creators, like, you know, there's differences in quality and things like that, but still the amount of like time and planning that go into making a good product, it's hard to like overstate that.
Well, and you can see when it's not done well, but sometimes it's hard to understand everything that goes into avoiding that and making it look good.
Yeah, and sometimes when you, when you open up the curtain and kind of reveal to some people how the sausage is made, it's like, oh,
yeah.
Now I see why this takes so long.
Yeah.
And so I think it helps to be patient and in those situations, and communicate with the people you're working with.
So, not everyone is going to have your eye, your background, your training, but there's a lot of, for want of a better term, and I would include myself in this very much, a lot of amateurs who are shooting video out of necessity. What's a tip? You don't have to give away all your trade secrets, but for the average person, let's say the average marketer who's trying to shoot video, maybe they're fully a team of one where they're developing social media content and posting it and responding to comments and writing news releases. What do you think people should really focus on if they want to do it well and they don't have the training or background that someone like you has?
Yeah. I mean, I think practice makes perfect. Like, you just need to get the reps in. It's not live.
Yeah.
You have as many takes as, I mean, obviously sometimes there's time constraints, but I think even if you're not like super skilled or you don't necessarily have like the background, I think just familiarizing yourself with the techniques and just getting the reps in that's a formula for making something that's worth watching.
Yeah, and you don't have to share everything publicly that is an experiment, right? There's plenty of opportunity to shoot stuff and edit it and take a second look at it without it ever seeing the light of day. One of my more recent mantras, I didn't always follow this advice and still sometimes don't, is done beats perfect. Right now with as much content as there is out there, if you wait until you've perfected it, there's 6 competitors who are getting content that's good enough out the door. All right, last question, and it's related, but you can take it in a different direction if you want. What's one thing you use in your work? And it could be related to video, or it could be entirely different. It could be a tip, a trick, a tool, a hack, whatever you want to call it. Something you use that you rely on that deserves a little bit of promotion of itself, something that is maybe underappreciated. We've had people say Google. We've had people say pen and paper, so it can be just about anything.
Yeah. I mean, I do like the Google Suite. It's very, very handy. I think I'll take the tip route. One thing that I get questions about a lot from people that don't necessarily have a background in video is just like how do I edit? How do I get started with editing? And there's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of free tools. One that I really like is DaVinci Resolve. It's made by a company called Blackmagic, and they have a free version, and it's professional grade editing software. Okay, and it can import pretty much any footage you like.
Is it Mac only, Mac and PC platform?
I believe it's Mac. I use Mac, but
sure.
I believe it's Mac and PC.
Okay,
and so I think that's a really great tool if people are just getting started. They don't want to like sink, money into getting the Adobe Suite. I think that's a good tool for a bit of a learning curve.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, you can learn technique-wise. You can learn pretty much anything you need to know on YouTube.
Yeah, for sure.
I've learned so much on YouTube in terms of techniques for Adobe Premiere and After Effects and things like that. So if you dedicate the time to learning those programs, you can really, you don't need to, you don't need to take a class necessarily.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's a huge advantage today that honestly is fairly new. This is going to this is going to date me, and I don't even need any help doing that. But when I started my career, some of the prerequisites, I was an English major. I had no real skills. And jobs were asking for things like, you need to know Lotus 123, precursor to Microsoft Excel, those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about. And I literally would watch VHS videos, right? But it was hard to access that. Whereas today, the barrier is time. It's all out there. Anything you want to learn is out there. It's just a matter of making a priority and going through, as you say, the reps of, okay, I'm going to learn from someone else. Then I'm going to apply it immediately. Because if I don't, I probably didn't learn much and going to need to do it again. So I really like that advice. In terms of some of the stuff you find, even as someone who's now seasoned and who was given a formal education, what are some of the things you're having to spend time learning or relearning? Is it just changes in technology, or is it tactics for videographers? What are you having to pick up on these days?
Yeah, so one thing I really just love to geek out about is just new equipment. Mm-hmm. Like I'm always researching and trying to figure out like what the new equipment is, how it's being used. So I think that's one thing I really like to keep track of. In terms of like learning techniques, there's always stuff that pops up.
Sure.
You can always learn more.
Sure.
So I can't think of any like specific examples, but After Effects is one thing that I really like to dive in.
Sure.
And just learn new, because you can do so many things with that tool.
Yeah.
It's very, there's not a whole lot of limits to what you can do with it. So that's something that I believe can really, really boost the production value of what you're doing. So that's one thing I always like to learn more about.
Yeah, probably a full-time job in itself, trying to keep up with
absolutely, absolutely.
Changing.
Yeah, I think maybe one of our next hires on the Polywood video team will hopefully be a motion graphics person, because that's something that my team handles, and none of us are really
it's a unique
super
skill
experts
set, right?
in that.
It's different than the skill set
Yeah.
for shooting live video. So
especially in ads these days.
Yeah. So if someone is out there who has an aspiration to work for Polywood and you do motion graphics, keep an eye on Indeed and other jobs.
There might be a job posting soon.
All right. Well, Jim, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate your time and hearing more about the work you're doing in Polywood and all those good things.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And thanks to everyone who took the opportunity to listen to this week's episode of the Azure Marketing Podcast. We'll be back next week with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.